Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Just getting a couple other folks in here from the waiting room. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I think we'll have some others joining, but don't want to take any time from the great conversation we're about to have. So thank you all for joining us for the second session during the Nonprofit Summit. Very excited to have Brandelyn Anderson here with us today. Executive Director of Flock for Love of Children, and really looking forward to this conversation to build on exactly what we just got done talking about, right? Values-based growth, values-based leadership, and how to really make sure we're moving our organizations forward, but doing so in a way that lines up with what we care about. So Brandelyn, thank you for being here. Very excited for this conversation. I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit, your organization, et cetera.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And hello, everyone. Good morning. I hope everyone's coffee has kicked in. I'm still waiting for mine. So as Matt mentioned, my name is Brandelyn Anderson. I'm the Executive Director at For Love of Children. We are an education nonprofit here in Washington, D.C., and we provide tutoring services for 2nd through 12th grade students, as well as college and career exploration for middle school and high school students. We also provide scholarships and academic support for our college students, and we serve under-resourced students here in Washington, D.C.
That's amazing. Thank you. And I just always like to hear a little bit of context. One, how long have you been with the organization? And two, kind of what made you interested in the work and what brought you to it a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been with Flock. It will be 5 years in July, which what is time? And I've actually worked in education my entire career. And so I won't say how many years that is, but I think the grades can kind of give you a little bit of context there. And so essentially what attracted me to Flock specifically was I was the first generation college graduate. And, you know, when you're a senior in high school and you're the first person preparing for college, there's a lot of rallying around you. There's a lot of, we're going to get you these scholarships. But when you get accepted and you go, there's just a lot of like, good luck, keep in touch, let us know how you're doing, right? So at Flock, we do a lot of very intentional work with post-secondary students. We support them through college with not only scholarships. The scholarships are kind of like the dangle the carrot to make sure they keep in touch with us, but workshops and support care packages, which I've personally put together in my living room, and just making sure that we're supporting them through that. And we've had students who've had challenges. We've helped them kind of get back on track. And that's really what brought me to Flock was something that really stood out as the organization was the work that they did with post-secondary. So we track students from 2nd grade through college and career. So I love that.
Got it. No, that's great. And that holistic approach probably never more needed than now, especially. When you think about the last 2 years, which I know a lot of us maybe try not to, but when you think about those last 2 years, obviously your programming probably shifted, maybe is shifting back, probably is different than it was, but for both your programming and also just how your team kind of functions or how your team works together, what looks different? What are some of those kind of big shifts when you think about that?
A lot looks different, but a lot is the same. So our program is virtual right now. We are prepping to pilot an in-person program over the summer, which is like scary and exciting at the same time. Our team looks completely different, as you mentioned in the last session. A lot of changes with staffing. And so we had an event in September and one of the students came up to me like, oh, Miss Brandelyn, like you're the only one that I recognize. And I was like, oh my God, not true. But, with masks and kids, it's been 2 years, it's just been a lot. But being able to work virtually has been wonderful. We literally in November of 2019 received a grant to do a technology overhaul that allowed us to just purchase laptops, which, oh my gosh, had we not, it would have been an absolute disaster. But essentially, like we've been able to reevaluate how we do things at Flock, right? So before it was a lot of meetings, well, still a lot of meetings, but now we're sort of like, does this need to be a meeting? Can it be an email? Is it something that can wait? Just being conscious of like how we're spending our time and being conscious of, meeting people where they are. This has been very stressful in a lot of ways for a lot of people, both personally and professionally. So giving a lot of grace where needed. So like if someone's just having some mental health challenges, they've been struggling, go ahead and work in the office if you want to, like get out of that space, do what you need to do, just trying to be as accommodating as we can as we're sort of, allegedly weaving our way out of this virtual space.
Definitely. No, I appreciate that. And we'll definitely circle back, especially to that team management piece, because I think, as you're saying there already, a lot of kind of values-based approach ties into that, right? And ties into both getting stuff done, but also being the manager and leader I want to be there, right?
Yeah.
So, one thing you hinted at a little bit when you're talking about the holistic nature of kind of Flock's worth, uh, um, probably ties to this question that someone had ahead of time, which was about impact. So as those of y'all that weren't in the previous session know, aggressive eco-friendly lighting here. So classic sudden moments of darkness will be true for me across the day. But anyway, so when you think about impact for your organization, how do you go about kind of evaluating that or defining that? Because it obviously means so many different things.
Right. I mean, so we have our general evaluations that we use for grants and the numbers and the testing and the evaluations and all of that good stuff. But for me, I think what's most important is the work that we do has a very, very long-term impact. So when I think about impact, I think about the emails that I receive from parents. I received an email about 2 weeks ago, and the parent was just talking about how her child was behind in math, really struggling, was, no self-confidence in class, would never speak up. But since coming to Flock, is raising their hand in class, is answering questions, has become a leader in the classroom. And that's something that that child will take with them throughout their entire career in life. And so that to me is the life-changing impact that we have. We're teaching kids how to advocate for themselves. We're teaching them how to speak up, how to ask questions. We're teaching them how to, it's okay to be behind. It's okay to ask for help. And it's okay to grow and learn in that. And so that to me is the true impact of the work. You do have the tangible things, but again, it's just those moments. And at the end of the email, that parent said, "We still need you." And I was like, "Oh man, I gotta today. I don't have time for this." But just that knowing that the work that we're doing and the work that everyone on this call is doing and the other nonprofits, it is so incredibly important. We are often lights in the storm. One thing that I can say is that Flock was, especially in 2020, when everything was just kind of going haywire, was a little tiny bit of familiarity that our kids had. They saw their same tutor that they had before the world went crazy. They saw the team. It was a familiar space. And that is something I'm extremely proud of. And that is a piece of that impact that I think is extremely important.
Definitely. And someone just messaged me asking, there's probably not a perfect answer to this, but any advice on communicating some of that to others, right? So obviously a big benefit of just knowing that internally and having those stories, and that's often what I think powers a lot of us on our day-to-day. But any advice on taking some of those qualitative pieces and actually kind of getting it out the door to folks a little bit?
Absolutely. So we've coined it mission moments, right? And so when we do our newsletters and our emails, and as we're talking to donors and funders and all of that, we have stories set up. And I think I only talk about the stories that personally impact me, like that made me feel really, really emotional, because I think that's easy to convey. And you can feel that when someone's talking about it, that you really, really, are excited about this moment. And this is something that really touched you personally. So definitely finding ways to incorporate those stories. And I call it a mission moment. So it's like a header. It's, something that people can look forward to. But those student stories and those moments, capturing those, but don't let them slip by, because it'd be very easy to read one email out of 295 that are currently sitting in your inbox, right? And just move on to the next. But kind of just take a second and really appreciate that. But make sure you're capturing those and finding really creative ways through outreach to share those stories. And it even could be, social media posts, those types of things, like quote from a Flock parent, that type of thing, I think is a really easy way to share those stories.
Definitely. That's great. Another way we're trying to get feedback from the community is actually feedback on the programming itself, right? Obviously what's going well, but also constructive feedback about what we can do better, and sometimes the needs we might be blind to, right? So how do you involve the community in your work in terms of that kind of feedback process, ideas? I would love to hear about how you all have done that.
I'm going to say a word that every executive director is probably going to roll their eye at, but we do surveys. We have really ramped up our surveys because it's a really easy touch point for everyone. So at Flock, we have upwards of 350 plus volunteers a year. That is a very critical community base that we can get a lot of feedback from. And so we're able to sort of get their ideas as we were like, oh, we're going to go back in person in the spring. Spring of what, right? And it was because of being able to have the conversations like, I'm not comfortable. We didn't have enough people who were ready to do that. We didn't have the resources available. So just kind of being able to make real-time decisions as we have to make so many quick decisions in this space. Parents have been really great at responses and letting us know what they need and what they want. And that's really helped us sort of, shape where we are right now programmatically. And as we're planning to move back to in-person, reshaping that as well with the support and input of our community.
Definitely. Well, and I think it's a great reminder too that a really kind of obvious or evident point, right, to do this is asking about that return to in-person, right, or what folks are comfortable with. And we've had a lot of partners ask, hey, what should we do? What are others doing, right? What's best practice? And all that's important. But also remembering we can just ask the folks we work with, right, about what they want is a great reminder there and a really tangible example of that community feedback. So thank you for that. I wanted to ask you a little bit more because I know from talking with you beforehand how excited you all about it. Can you tell us a little more about your City Leaders program? I think it's a great kind of tie into this kind of community engagement piece.
Yes, our City Leaders program is a revamp of our previous Scholars program. And it's really a program that's designed to support our middle school, high school, and post-secondary students outside of our tutoring program, which is our neighborhood tutoring program. So for our middle school and high school students, we have a project-based learning model, which I'm really excited about, where we get students to work with leaders in a variety of careers on tangible projects. So we had students produce a film project. We had students do photography project. We actually have students who just published their first book. So 6 of our middle school students wrote and published this book. And the purpose of this is to ensure that they get to learn about different careers. They get to explore the behind the scenes of a variety of different opportunities. And as we're thinking about college, like we now have one of our students who's participated in this was saying that, hey, I want to write another book. Can you help me? Yes, 6th grade. I absolutely can help you with that. And so it's really exciting to see that. We also have our our college exploration. So we have PSAT and SAT prep that falls under this program. We have college coaching. So each of our 11th and 12th grade students are paired with a coach that, walks them through step by step the college application process, how to choose a school, FAFSA, scholarships, all those wonderful things. And then of course, once they graduate from high school, and college. We provide the scholarships, the workshops, we have a career night, a college night, all those wonderful things. So that's sort of our all right, so now that you're on track academically, let's start thinking about the future. And that's sort of our pipeline program to help them do that. I love the City Leaders program, if you can't tell.
Well, and I think when you're talking about that, we were talking about the work in general, obviously so clearly personally passionate about it, right? As is your team. And I think this is one of the great things about our sector, right? It's a lot of folks kind of living out their passion, right? Living out their call. And at the same time, there's some challenges when you're living out your passion or call, right? Doing work you care that much about. So I'd love to hear from you all, and probably coming out of the pandemic, this is something you're thinking about in terms of, do we keep virtual programming in person, both? Are we just doing more and more? How do you balance the fact that y'all are obviously so passionate about what you do, but also want to grow in a way that's sustainable and that your team has capacity for?
Yeah, we're definitely about quality over quantity. So, it's wonderful to say we've served 5,000 students, but I don't know any of them personally. And, I don't know, they're doing great. They show up every day, right? And so for us, it really is about maintaining the quality of our programming. We're a nonprofit that does one-on-one tutoring. And so while we want to serve 1,000 kids or 2,000 kids, that's 2,000 volunteers. How does that work, right? And what does that still give the quality training that we provide to our tutors? Can we still provide those touch points and all of that with a small staff? Can we afford to hire more staff? So I think it would be great. Yeah, when I first started as ED, I was like, yes, we're going to open a Baltimore office. We're going to open an Oakland office. And my board was like, please calm down. I was like, okay, we're going to focus on my goodness, right? But I think that it's just really important to gauge, your strengths, right? And so we are going to have to maintain some semblance of virtual programming. And we're going to have to, because with, the spacing and all of that, a normal program night could have over 100 people in one room with kids running around and all that, and we're not going to see that for a long time. So we want to make sure that we can maintain that, and also maintain the tutors who have invested in Flock from around the country, who are now able to log on and serve, as opposed to have to hop on Metro and come to the office. So it really is about, what do you have the capacity to do? I'm very conscious of the workload of my team and wanting to make sure that, I don't walk in and see someone just laid out one day because they're just like, oh my gosh, I'm tapped out, because that's not productive, And so finding that balance of, what's feasible. Can we take on this additional partnership that can give us an additional 100 kids? Yes. Can we take on DCPS and serve all the students? No, we don't have the capacity for that, right? So just keeping that in mind, but also to your point again, talking to the community, which would be the team, and having those conversations of how are you doing, how are we feeling, like what's the capacity, what do we need, what's working, what's not working. Constantly having those conversations has been really, really beneficial.
And someone had just messaged to say, for if you apply that and you eventually have to say no to something, how any advice on communicating that, even just internally to kind of board and staff about, great example of like, yeah, it'd be great if we served another 1,000 kids by doing this partnership, but we can't. Communicating that at least internally. Any advice there?
Yeah, we had an opportunity to apply for a very significant grant that would have changed the organization. You want to talk about major impact. But in order to do this grant, we would have to change our values as an organization, right? We do intervention tutoring, right? And so if you're in the 5th grade and you're reading on the 2nd grade, that's where we start you. We push you. We're not in the business of just helping you get through your homework and just making you, get to the next day. We want to make sure you really understand. And so it was really kind of like the struggle, like, do we take these millions of dollars and really kind of do more work and expand and hire more people? Or do we remain true to what we do as an organization? And so that was a very tough conversation because, the board of directors, they're here to fundraise. They want to learn more. Money, like, how dare you walk away from money? And like, I have to, because that's not what we do, right? We're not going to just start, changing our methods and how we run the organization and what we provide for a check. The money will come, And so it's really, you just have to kind of make those tough decisions and decide what's more important. Is it something that you can do? Great, then go for it. If it's something that, would make you feel a little queasy inside because you're like, oh, this isn't quite right, but you just have to kind of make those decisions and do what's best, and then kind of stand firm in that. I did get some pushback, and I accepted the pushback and stood by my decision, because again, I can't do a disservice to the people that we do serve by making those changes and watering down the quality of the work that we do.
Definitely. No, I appreciate that a lot. And I think I really love how you described there that you led with the fact that like this isn't mission oriented, right? Or this isn't, values based for us. Because I think a lot of times our natural instinct, if we're saying no to something, explain it, especially to our board, is to list like a laundry list of reasons, right? And get pretty defensive off the bat. And I think instead of having that core argument of like, hey, look, this isn't us, and A is a lot harder to argue with as a board in
Right.
some ways, and B feels a little more natural, right? So that's great. Thank you for
And I think
that. Yeah.
just to happen really quickly on that, making sure that your board is really locked into your mission and vision, it won't be a hard sell, right? And so as long as they really truly understand what your mission is, what your vision is, what your goals are, and how you operate as an organization, but really being bought into that, it's not a hard sell. And it wasn't a hard sell. Like, there were questions because they're like, well, wait a minute, what do you mean you said no to this? But I was like, this is why, and this is how, and so that made it a lot easier to have that conversation.
Definitely. Someone asked before we move on, related here, you were talking about kind of focusing on quality over quantity, right? Any advice for kind of showing the value or kind of impact of that quality-based approach when talking to either your board or funders or other kind of external stakeholders?
So I think it depends on your organization, but I can say for Flock, if our name is for love of children, right? And our mission is to ensure that all of our students receive the resources that they need in order to be successful. If you have the success rates, if you're seeing kids are growing, if you're seeing they're getting into more and more colleges, like we love for our kids to have to choose which school they want to go to because they have so many choices. Bringing people back to the mission, those mission moments, I think, and just showing like the work that we're doing is working. And as you can see, we are stretched as far as we can possibly go right now. And this is where we are now. If we want to talk about more employees, if we want to talk about, more program options, let's talk about more fundraising board of directors. Let's all get in this together, right? And so I think that those are the conversations that you can have, and just saying like the work that we're doing is working. This is where we are staff wise. This is where we are capacity wise. And then just having those very, very transparent conversations, but having the data to back it up, I think is really the best way. You can't, uh, you have to have that data. You can't deny data. That's what I was trying to figure out, right? And so it's just like, yeah, we still have 100% of our high school students graduating from college. We still have an over 80% rate of our college students graduating from college. Like those are really, really important numbers and really important things. And so do we want to water that down, or do we want to continue pushing forward and ensuring that we have the updated curriculum, we have the most updated opportunities for students, like we're moving forward with the times, and then we can say, all right, now we're ready to expand because we're good here, we have the funding to back it up, and now we can do more, expand and hire. Because I think a lot of times it's easy to dream, but you have to have the money to make things happen, to make changes happen. So yeah, let's talk about expansion, but let's also talk about the fundraising that needs to happen in front of that. I've got the fiscal year, you guys get the dream, and that's how we kind of work together.
Definitely. No, I appreciate that. And I think the only thing I'll say too is I love your example, even in the story that you're telling, right? To find data in unexpected places. So one thing would be thinking about the data you're sharing. So the admission rates, acceptance rates, those are things people expect. But for instance, the average number of colleges your students are accepted to, that's a quality thing, right? That our kids now have choice, right? And there's some dignity and equity that goes along with that, and be able to communicate that as a quality metric, not just a quantity metric. Great example of being able to pull a number out of a story there. So something else to think about for those asking. Well, great. Well, I want to get back to this idea about kind of, passionate workers, right, who care a lot about it. At the same time, we know burnout is a crisis in the nonprofit sector, and teams are tired, and engagement is a challenge. So I want to hear what a little bit about what you've done to kind of keep your team engaged, and how you help them kind of balance maybe the fact you got a lot of probably young professionals who care a lot about the work they do, are excited by it, but also you're worried about their long-term engagement. Any advice there for managers?
I mean, this is definitely a work
piece of cake, right?
Just easy breezy Tuesday. What I have done is I have been working very hard to have one-on-one conversations with team members as much as possible, which has been really, interesting, just to kind of get their perspective from their role and what they need. You can tell when people are tired. So we've reduced the number of meetings that we have, just as a whole, because especially with our programs team, they have to be online for 4 to 5 hours a day just for program, right? And so now we want to add extra meetings on there. I think the best example I can give is around the holidays, we close the week between Christmas and New Year. And we usually do like a half day, I don't know, the 23rd, whatever it is. And I was thinking, like, I personally, Brandelyn, do not feel like sitting on a Zoom for an awkward holiday party with the team, because, it's just always kind of like, whose turn is it now? And, it's kind of, whatever. So I sent an email to the team and I said, okay, guys, we have a choice. Do you want to have a full day off, or would you like to have a holiday party? Either way is fine. I'll let you guess what they chose. But we did it early enough also so that people could actually make plans. So they got additional time, they got additional break, and then they were able to come back and be rested. We've also invested in a lot of our benefits. And so we have EAP options now for our staff, which has actually really come in handy. And our HR team is very quick to point people to those opportunities should they need them as they're having conversations about challenges they might be having personally and professionally. And then just trying to be aware of you being a human being and having needs while not understanding that the organization has work that needs to be done. So when new employees start, we have a favorite things survey that we have them fill out. And it's just little things. What's your favorite color, candy, snack, all those types of things. And that's something that we can use to help incentivize. So thank you so much, for this great work that you've done. Here's your favorite bag of M&Ms because I see you and I want you to know that we appreciate you in this very small way. And it really does go a long way because you don't want to just be employee number 5, you want to be Brandelyn, right? And so that's been helpful, but just, paying attention, encouraging time off, you have it, please use it. And just ensuring that people can, have the space to do what they need to do. We have opened it up so that if an employee is like, hey, I can't really people today, so I'm just gonna not, meet and work. And you see a lot more productivity that way as well. So doing what we can. I welcome any advice. Just trying our best to kind of navigate this very strange time.
Definitely. And I really love that personalized approach there. I think that, a little bit extra time on your part, but makes a lot of difference for folks to feel seen there and feel that there was a little effort for them specifically. On this accountability piece, I'd love to just know, thinking about the fact that most of your team is still kind of virtual, right? Isn't kind of in the office with you. Any additional advice or other things you're doing to kind of drive home that accountability and grace? That in person we can tell when someone's having a bad day or tired. We may not be able to tell as easily virtually. So yeah, any advice there?
Yeah. So one of the things that we started using Trello, which is an online sort of very detailed, massive to-do list type thing. We can move things around. But it's really great because you can see things are happening in real time without having to micromanage anyone, right? We're very transparent with deadlines. We're very clear about, hey, this needs to happen at this time. And then having grace when things kind of pop up at the last minute, which always happens, but trying to give space while using a tool like Trello, where at any point I can log on to any team members page and kind of see, what's going on. If I don't see any movement, that's when we can have a conversation like, hey, I just want to check in. How are things going? And it's a really great way to just be able to interact without having to physically meet, check in, and all that stuff. The great thing about Flock is that it's really evident when things aren't happening. It's really, really clear. And so it's very easy to catch those conversations early, do those check-ins and kind of find out what's going on and then make adjustments as needed.
Definitely. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Probably sometimes I think for a lot of us that are executive directors, harder than helping staff balance is balancing ourselves. So any advice on how you've, especially in terms of modeling, how you've modeled some of this behavior you want to see from your team?
So I'm saying this with the caveat of this is not every day, right? But I have capped the number of meetings that I have in any given day, because in the beginning, especially with this virtual life, you can be in 6 different meetings in one day about 6 completely different topics with no downtime in between, because in the real world, you would drive in between meetings, you would have that downtime. And now it's just like next link, next link, next link. Okay, great. Now we're talking about this. So having that time in between and capping that is really important. My calendar is public. And so people can see every day at 12 o'clock, I have a lunch break. It literally physically says lunch break. Like, I'm good. I'm going to make sure I eat lunch, play with my dog, keep it moving, and then have that space. Last week, I had a really severe asthma attack, and, I had all these things to do, but my body was just like, no, ma'am, like, we've already been to the ER twice. Like, this is not okay. So I don't like to show weakness. You want to be the leader, you want to be strong, but I sent an email to the full team and my board chair and said, hey, I'm sick. I need to log off. I'm taking Friday and Monday, and I'm going to be on my breathing treatments, and I'm going to log off. And thankfully I was able to reshift some meetings and things like that. But it was really important because I need the team to understand, like, you don't get points for working sick. Like, you need to take care of yourself. And that's why you have time off. If you're sick, be sick, heal yourself, because I'd rather you take a day or two off than be off for a few months or off forever. Right. And so it's really important to make sure that I'm able to model that. I'm very transparent with my time and how I'm spending my time. And I've also gotten very good at scheduling emails because, yes, I'm absolutely up at random hours of the day and night, off hours. But just because you're receiving an email from me, I don't want you to feel like you need to respond in that moment, but I also don't want to forget. So I'll schedule it. So you might wake up to 15 emails from me at 8 a.m. because that's when I scheduled it. But you know what I mean? Rather than getting it at 1 a.m. because I'm up like, oh my gosh, I forgot this needs to happen. So just those little tips have been my way of doing it. But giving myself space to kind of clear my head and make sure that I'm focused and able to do what I need to do has been really helpful.
Definitely, no, I think that's really helpful. I think a lot of those are really practical tips. I think folks can take back, especially the public calendar, meeting caps. I'm like, oh man, that sounds great. So that's great. Thank you for that. So someone asked in the chat, and less of a question we kind of need to dive into, but just to clarify, about this session and also earlier, they were talking about kind of values guiding our decision-making process and growth opportunities versus strategic plan. We are definitely very pro strategic plan here and kind of pro strategy. So hopefully those values were baked into your strategic plan is what we would say. So just for anyone kind of asking that or kind of thinking about that, obviously kind of strategy and strategic decisions are going to guide our kind of overall choices. But again, hopefully values are baked into that. And when new things come up that we couldn't have planned for, that's where both our strategic plan, but also our values are going to help us make those choices. So thanks for asking that in the chat there. Another question we had someone submit ahead of time was around as an executive director, it's often kind of a siloed role, right? You have your board that you can talk to, but technically it's kind of your manager, right? You have your staff you can talk to, but also they're reporting to you. So any advice for kind of staying authentic in that role, knowing those two relationships, how you're kind of sharing things appropriately, but not oversharing there?
So I have actually been very fortunate. I have a new board chair who is phenomenal, and she and I had a conversation early on. And I told her, I was like, I need someone to brain dump with and kind of flush things out. And she said, okay, right. And so there's times I'll send her a text message like brain dump, and it's usually a crisis. I'm like, wow, but she's been really great. She's like, what do you need? Do you need me to listen? Do you need to vent? Or do you want to kind of work things out? And so we kind of have those conversations. I think it's really important to make sure that you do share information with the team. You do share as you can, right? How and why certain decisions were made. Like, we decided not to take this very large grant that was very public, and here's why. You know what I'm saying? So having those transparent conversations, this is why we made this shift. This is why we've done this. And I have no problem with that, because I think one of the worst things that you can do is just have like this veil of secrecy around, the organization. Like, it's uncomfortable, right? Now, can I share every detail? Absolutely not, because I don't want to freak anyone out, right? But you do learn how to what you can share, and making people feel like they are actually a part of the organization instead of just being there to work. And so that's been how I've been able to do it. It's just having the conversations as a full team, welcoming any questions, welcoming any side conversations if people are not quite sure, they don't understand, if they're frustrated about something, being open to having that conversation as well. And then also just kind of standing firm in the decision that I've made, if that's a decision that needs to be made, if I can't share the full context of why. So that's been helpful. And just making sure that, if you're employed at Flock, you're a part of the team, and making sure that you feel like you're a part of that has been really important.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And, we've heard some folks adding even like if their team is big enough, sometimes there's only 4 or 5 of you, this would be weird. But if your team is 10 plus, doing like a ask anything, answer all type session, once or twice a year. Then again, you can choose what you answer there.
Yeah.
But giving staff the ability to ask questions, and I think that empowerment is really important. So thank you for sharing that. getting back to board, since you brought up board chair, I'd just love to know in general, some tips on engaging your board. But maybe first, we had a couple questions about just how do you feel like your board's doing these days, kind of coming out of pandemic? Are you meeting back in person? Is it still virtual? Is engagement lower because the virtual piece? Is it higher because of it? What does that look like when you think about board engagement these days?
So we're definitely still virtual in terms of, we actually have a board meeting next week. I think that engagement is what is to be expected in this time, where when I can catch them, when they're actively focused on flock, they are actively focused on flock, but then, they have their own lives, their own situations, their own challenges that they're dealing with in this time. And so just being respectful of that. In terms of board engagement, I'm all about relationships. And so one of my favorite things pre-pandemic was the one-on-one meetings with board members. Like, hey, let's meet up for lunch, let's meet up for coffee, want to know what you're interested in. It's really important to understand them as individuals, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what they're interested in, and why they joined the board, because you can use that as you're planning out your fundraising strategies for the year, and your engagement strategy. So if I know for sure this person is, very into corporate, right? Great. Hey, I have some corporate partnerships I'm trying to get. Help me strategize for this. And that really gives them that buy-in. But if I go to that person and say, hey, I need help kind of thinking about this program we're trying to start, I'm like, well, what do you mean? So really understanding each board member, having those one-on-one relationships, having those personal relationships. I'm very big on, celebrations. So if someone has a baby or it's their birthday or whatever have you, just making sure that we acknowledge those things. They have a work anniversary, just making sure that we are also celebrating them as well, is really, really helpful. And then I guess, again, just truly understanding what they want to do on the board is really helpful as you are working with them directly. How to engage them.
Definitely. No, it's great. Someone asked to us, and there's always a difficult one. There's no right answer to probably, but one area that they struggle with kind of infusing their values is in their fundraising, and in their fundraising appeals. Any advice or thoughts or ways you all have thought about that in terms of kind of bringing your values into how you fundraise and into how you talk about your work?
Yeah, I think we're fortunate at Flock, because who doesn't want to make sure kids know how to read and write and are successful, right? Like, it's great. But I think that we are kid first. It's literally in the name. You can't get away from it. And just making sure that, the work that we're doing, the money that we're reaching out to is in line with ensuring that it lines up with what we want. We're an organization that serves 100% Black and Brown students. I'm a Black woman leading this organization. There have been a lot of uncomfortable conversations around that. At Flock, we don't use the term low income in any way, shape, or form. We use the term under-resourced. And that was a big conversation that we had because I was, quite frankly, disrespected by someone who was affiliated with the organization based off of assumptions she was making about me because I'm the first person to graduate from college in my family. And so for me, it really sparked this idea of how are we talking about our students? How do we talk to our students? How do we, get people to take off their capes to come in and save the poor children and say, hey, I just want to make sure you're great. What can I do? You know what I mean? And so really having those conversations, but transparently having those conversations has been very, very interesting. And so one of our values is dignity, respect, and just ensuring that everyone who's treated at Flock, who comes to Flock is treated with dignity and respect. And we don't look at where you are, we look at where you can go. And so that's what we focus on. And so as we're fundraising, as we're looking at donors and having those conversations, we will explain why we don't use the term low income. We will explain why, it's important to understand who we work with and how we work with and how we speak to them and about them. And that has been a really important change that has happened, and just making sure that we stand true to that, right? Like I will go through a grant application with a highlighter that says low income, take it out. Yeah, but funders, I don't care. Under resourced, thank you, because that's what we do at Flock. And it's been, there was some pushback, but I said what I said. This is what we do, and thanks so much. Let's make that adjustment. And it's been really, really helpful because people, I think, have become more comfortable. They don't feel like they need to tiptoe. You just want to give to an organization who's helping these children achieve their goals. Great, let's do it.
Yes, no, 100% agreed. And as someone just said in the chat, also agreed, language is so important there, and a way that, as you were just describing, to have bigger conversations as well, right? With the board, and really talk about the value behind it.
Imagine if like you had something that was out of your control that people just labeled you as and called you by that name, and that was the only thing you were known by. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not fair, it's limiting, and it's not allowing the kids to be individuals, right? So the students who publish this book are now published authors, right? It doesn't matter that they don't have, you know, XYZ, or, you know, they might have this challenge going on at home. They're published authors. They're now thinking about college. They're now, one of them's, you know, ready to write his second book. These are the types of things that we celebrate and the opportunities that we try to provide.
Definitely, that's great. Someone had asked, so this is gonna take you back 5 years, which again, what is time? But they're relatively new ED, so just asking you, based on your experience from when you came in, any advice for kind of where to first prioritize, and maybe you know, obviously a million things when you step into the ED role, but any advice you have there for kind of those first 6 months, 9 months?
What's the name of the person who asked that question? Do you have a name?
Let me check here. I got private message. I'll find it. Yeah.
Okay, person. You are not going to be able to solve every problem at the same time, and you're not going to be able to fix every issue at once. And so for me, the biggest problem that we had was our finances were in shambles at the time. And so that was my first step, right? You also need to make sure that you have a leadership team around you that can handle some of the smaller things with your guidance, to ensure that things are always constantly happening, but it's not always constantly you. You are not, I mean, you might be, but hopefully you're not a solo employee, right? And you're not alone in this endeavor. Utilize your team, allow them to take ownership of some of those pieces, and that brings more buy-in to your team as well. But giving them the space to kind of learn and make those mistakes while knowing that things are happening in the background while you focus on the main points. If you don't fix this problem, can your organization continue? Right? If I don't get more money in the bank, we will not continue. So that was what I worked on, right? And so just making sure that you kind of prioritize it that way and give yourself some grace. Oh my gosh, I'm getting chills thinking about that first year. I don't know how I made it, but you really have to give yourself some grace and understand that you're not going to be able to do it all at one time, and certainly not by yourself. So know who your people are, know who your allies are on the board, know who are the people that you can reach out to get help. The catalog has an amazing ED cohort group, and if you're involved in that, I cannot tell you the importance of that safe space to say, I don't know, I need help. Or sometimes you're like, oh wow, I'm not the only person on the planet going through this problem. There's a lot of levity that comes from that space, and so being able to participate in that is really, really important, and have people that you can have those conversations with is really important.
Definitely. No, I really appreciate that. I think yeah, a lot of that probably holds true for those of us that have been in the role for a while as well. Still in terms of prioritizing, and definitely the need for supportive networks there. That's great. Thank you. Someone has this a little off our original topic of values-based growth, but since you mentioned that y'all are kind of volunteer driven, someone's just asking, are you seeing kind of volunteers in terms of their engagement? Are folks showing up these days? Are they too exhausted to how's that going right now for y'all?
Yeah, and again, we're lucky because with our volunteers, you're actually paired with a student, and that's your student, right? And so you develop that relationship. So we have not seen a drop in our volunteer engagement at all, which has been fantastic, because people who do volunteer for a program like Flock really do care. And so you get to show up every week, even if you're tired, you get to hear about how things went at school, how they're doing, celebrate them passing that math test, all those wonderful things. And so we've been very, very fortunate. We've always had just an incredible base of volunteers and a lot of really cute kids, which has really been able to increase that engagement. And fortunately, through this virtual space, I think I mentioned this earlier, we're able to have volunteers from anywhere in the country. And so that's been a huge benefit because people who may have left Flock or whatever have you can come back and still work with kids. So that's been wonderful. So no, we've been very fortunate in that. Now recruitment has been a bit of a challenge, because getting new people engaged has been a bit of a challenge because people are like, nope, I don't want to hear the word Zoom again. But that has been a challenge. But the people that we do have are amazing, and we honestly cannot do the work without them.
Definitely. That's great to hear. I just want to remind folks, feel free to put any questions in. We have about 10 minutes left. We have 2 questions left that we've gotten from folks. We'll ask those, but if you have others, feel free to put them in the chat or message me. One of those final 2, this will be, I think we all could use a little motivation right now. So what's keeping you motivated right now? What are some of the things you're doing, reading, thinking about, seeing, etc.?
What's keeping me motivated is honestly just the why, right? Why did I come to Flock? Why do I care so much about the mission? And it's our kids, and just seeing their growth and their trajectory. What's keeping me motivated is knowing that we're, making real progress. We're still here. I have a lot of people who work for this organization who care. They motivate me every day, even though I don't really get to see them on a regular basis. And just honestly making sure that if I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, then the kids that come to us, that the parents that tell us they need us, don't get to have what we bring. And that is a huge motivator. And so it's really important to make sure that, I take the time that I need for myself. I take the mental breaks that I need to take. I am leading by example and just making sure that our team is able to understand that this is tough, this is extraordinary, this is weird, and it's okay to not be okay. But it's all just communicate and let us know. So staying motivated has been a challenge, especially, it's rainy, it's whatever. I want to be outside, I want to frolic, and I don't feel comfortable doing that, right? I told my husband, I feel trapped in this house. So we did like a really quick getaway for like one day to Annapolis. You know what I mean? But it was great. I needed that. So just doing what you need to do, being in tune with yourself, being in tune with your needs. And I highly, highly recommend a work day. So every Wednesday is my work day. I don't take any meetings that day wherever possible, unless a donor needs to meet, then absolutely here I come. But having that day just to knock out your to-do list, to be in pajamas if you need to kind of just, just get things off your plate, is really helpful. And it's like, okay, I'm feeling productive. That's also a motivator for me. It's just feeling productive and being able to keep things moving forward.
Definitely agreed on that.
Yeah.
A couple of questions have come in. One is, how many kids does Flock serve? And if you were thinking about how many you would like to, is there a number for that?
So we serve around 600 students, give or take, a year. And I really can't answer the second part because I'm very much so in, let's just make sure we can get through this school year. I mean, ultimately, we did have a goal of 1,000 students by 2020. Then 2020 happened. So, we are going to be rethinking our strategic plan because it's come and gone during the pandemic, and we want to make sure that we're kind of refocusing, but we want to set smaller increments. So probably 1,000 students next, and then 2,000 students and all that stuff. But again, only if we have the space and capacity to do so.
Definitely leading with that quality again.
And funding.
Yes. A couple fun questions folks sent me. One of these was, if you had, what is something that if you had a chance to do it differently during your time as ED, you would do? I mean, only one thing that comes to mind, generally perfect, but anything that stands out as something you would do over if you had a chance.
There's probably like a million things that I would do over. I think for me, when I first started as executive director, I definitely had on my rose-colored glasses. I was like, I had this incredible relationship with the board as the director of programs. They loved Brandelyn, I loved them. I was never ever privy to the finances. I was just like, oh my God, this is so exciting. Like, I can come in and do my little Brandelyn magic. Oh my God. So I think I would have been a little bit more reserved and observant in the beginning. How do things actually work, right? What's the truth? Like, who are these people actually outside of the board meetings that we had, where they're just nodding and smiling about all the wonderful work that's going on? I think that would have been my first step. And I think giving myself some grace. I was stressed. There were extraordinary circumstances my first year. Like, when I say extraordinary, like the day that I was named executive director, one of our employees was killed in a car accident. Like, day one, welcome, hello, right? And so for me, I never gave myself some grace. I literally ran myself into the hospital from not eating, not drinking water, stress, taking everything on myself, not relying on the team around me. And so when I gave that advice earlier, I'm literally speaking from experience. Like, you have to lean on the people around you. You are not a one person show. There's a reason why you have a team at your organization. Utilize them. Let them make mistakes. Let them have challenges and issues, because you became an executive director. You became a leader because you've had experiences that allow you to say, okay, that was terrible, let me do it this way, right? So giving people that same opportunity is really important, but making sure that they understand what your standards are is really important as well. So I would say definitely give yourself some grace, definitely give yourself the opportunity to learn and grow yourself, because I was like, I had no idea what being an executive director was when I started. I had no idea what the weight felt like. And so allowing yourself time to adjust to that, I think I would definitely have been a little bit more cautious and observant when I first started. I was like, great, welcome, let's do it. Oh my God, what's happening?
I think again, modeling, a little bit modeling the grace to yourself there, right? The same grace that you obviously have for your team, applying that to yourself as well. That's great. Someone asked, this I think would probably be the toughest question today. Top 2 book recommendations.
Oh gosh, I can see it in my head. What's it called? Leaders Eat Last. Is that what it's called? I'll have to email it out, but Leaders Eat Last is one that my leadership team and I are reading, because we're dealing with a different type of team now. So like, how do we kind of work through that? Thank you. Barely. Leaders Eat Last is one that I'm reading. And then I also just finished a book. So I have a program called Brandelyn's Book Buddies, and I share books that I read with students and volunteers. I just read a book called Black Boy Joy, and it's a compilation of 17 stories. And it was just the sweetest break from the world. And it really made me happy reading those books, reading that book. So Black Boy Joy is definitely a book that I recommend, because it talks about just kids being kids. And I was just like, oh my God, just the innocence. I missed that. So definitely needed that little break as well.
That's great. And then I think the last question from our audience, and we have one more to wrap us up here. Any tips for volunteer appreciation? So what you do to kind of keep your volunteers engaged, let them know how much they mean to you.
I'll be totally honest. That's definitely something that we have been working with and trying to do. We do have a small group of ambassadors that we work with and kind of get feedback and advice from them. So we do, Sugar Wish has been a major thing that we use. So it's like this little, you send them an email, they can pick out the candy that they want, all that good stuff. We highlight volunteers weekly in our outreach emails. And then we're actually planning our volunteer appreciation week coming up. We learned that they don't like gifts are kind of like, they don't need another water bottle. They don't need, all that good stuff. But they do enjoy food. So we've tried to figure out how to, feed people. This COVID life has been really difficult because the things that we would normally do, a really good happy hour, a catered, situation can't really happen. So this month we're doing, my book buddies will be 5 volunteers. They're going to be able to get a signed copy of the book and meet the author. So just like those types of things. And then also, giving them space during program to, ask the questions and do what they need to do. So they also feel supported, which I think goes a very long way. So any advice, I welcome any advice for that as well.
Definitely, that's great. And then last question, simply any thought, idea, or takeaway you want to leave our audience with today?
I think that we are in a really challenging time, right? I was telling someone that we don't know how to people anymore. Like even when we're outside, we're so used to being in our own spaces, doing our own things, that when someone interrupts our space, we're like, whoa, hold on. Like, why did you cut me off? So I think being able to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. We always talk about this radical idea of, oh my gosh, what do you mean take a day off? Take a day off. Like take some time off, put some buffers in your schedule, do what you can to take care of yourself, because that will only make you a better leader, right? And then also remembering the why did you get into this work in the first place? What keeps you motivated? And if you can't answer those questions, maybe it's time to think about what's next, right? And so being honest with yourself about what it is that you need, what you want, and taking that time for yourself, well, I think will only make you a better leader.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for that, and thank you so much for your time today. I know how busy you are, so I appreciate it. A great conversation, and hopefully a lot of great points for folks to take back. I just put in the chat for y'all again the workbook, so that has links to upcoming sessions. We have about a 10-minute break here. Then right at noon, we'll start our peer-to-peer sessions. This is a chance for you to hear from each other. We'll have facilitated conversations that you'll hear a little bit from us, but also a lot from your fellow peers in the space about either mission-based communications, board culture, or fundraising. Just a few small topics, right, that we'll be diving into. So we look forward to seeing you all here in about 10 minutes at noon. The links are in that workbook. Thank you again, Brandelyn, for being with us today, and hope you all have a good rest of the summit. Thank you all.